We have been warning for months on this show that the neocons in Washington, D.C. are actively trying to get President Trump to go to war with Iran. Israel, of course, would love nothing more than to make that happen. They got the United States to go along and go into Iraq and go into Libya. They would love nothing more from the third leg of that stool to be Iran. Yesterday, friend of the show, Tucker Carlson, sent a not too veiled warning to President Trump about what is happening. He posted this. Mark Levin was at the White House today lobbying for war with Iran. To be clear, Levin has no plans to fight in this or any other war. He's demanding that American troops do it. We need to stop Iran from building nuclear weapons. He and like-minded ideologues in Washington are now arguing they're just weeks away. If this sounds familiar, it's because the same people have been making the same claim since at least the 1990s. It's a lie. In fact, there's zero credible evidence that suggests Iran is anywhere near to building a bomb or has plans to. None. Anyone who claims otherwise is ignorant or dishonest. If the U.S. government knew Iran was weeks away from possessing a nuclear weapon, we'd be at war already. Iran knows this, which is why they aren't building one. Iran also knows it's unwise to give up its weapons program entirely. Muammar Gaddafi tried that and wound up sodomized with a bayonet as soon as he did that. Of course, we all know exactly they learned the obvious lesson and NATO killed him. So why is Mark Levin once again hyperventilating about all of this? And let me pull this up. Sorry, I moved it a little too quickly here. Why is Mark Levin once again hyperventilating about weapons of mass destruction to distract you from the real goal, which is regime change? Young Americans heading back to the Middle East to topple yet another government. Virtually no one will say this out loud. America's record of overthrowing foreign leaders is so embarrassingly counterproductive that regime change has become a synonym for disaster. Officially, no one supports it. So instead of telling the truth about their motives, they manufacture hysteria. A country like Iran could never have the bomb. They'll nuke Los Angeles. We have to act right now. They don't really mean this, and you can tell they don't by what they omit. At least two of Iran's neighbors, both Islamic nations, already have nuclear weapons. That fact should scare the hell out of Mark Levin, yet for some reason he never mentions it. How come? Because it's not the weapons he hates, it's the ideology of the Iranian government, which he is lobbying to overthrow. Then he goes on. If it goes without saying, there are very few Trump voters who'd support a regime change war in Iran. Donald Trump has argued loudly against reckless lunacy like this. Trump ran for president as a peace candidate. That's what made him different from conventional Republicans. It's why he won. A war with Iran would amount to a profound betrayal of his supporters. It would end his presidency. That may explain why so many of Trump's enemies are advocating for it. If you've been seriously injured, your case could be worth millions, and you should know exactly what your rights are. That's why I want to tell you about Morgan & Morgan. They're America's largest injury law firm with over 1,000 attorneys working in all 50 states. And unlike a lot of firms that settle quickly, Morgan & Morgan doesn't take lowball offers from insurance companies. Just in the past few months, they won $12 million in Florida when the insurance company offered only $350,000. And in New York, they secured $6.8 million on a case where the offer was just $275,000. And the best part? It's absolutely free unless you win. Insurance companies try to pay out as little as possible. Morgan & Morgan fights to get you more if you become their client. It only takes a few minutes to see if you have a case, and you can do it right from your phone. It's that easy. You can visit forthepeople.com/redacted, or you can click the link in the description to get started. Let's bring in Colonel Douglas MacGregor now to talk about this and get his assessment of all of this. Colonel, great to see you. Welcome back to the show. I thought it was important to read almost the bulk of that message about these neocons and warmongers who are actively trying to push us into a war with Iran. What do you think is happening? It seems like we are barreling towards that, and Tucker is doing everything he can to get the message out, and hopefully President Trump receives that message. Do you think he's receiving that message?
Listen, we are much closer to going to war with Iran than the average American on the street realizes. And let's be frank, the Israelis want to retain their monopoly when it comes to nuclear weapons in the region. I mean, if they were really concerned about preventing Iran or any other state from using a nuclear weapon in the region, well, then they would sign up for the nuclear free zone in the Middle East. Everybody else in the region will sign up for it, but the Israelis certainly won't because they want that nuclear weapon. If they don't have it, they can't bully their neighbors with impunity. So I think that has to be kept in mind. And I'm sure Mr. Levin will never say that publicly, but I think it's very true. But there are some people that would probably accept a nuclear-free zone, but not very many. We know that about 80% of the Israelis are literally 100% behind what Mr. Netanyahu is doing. So I think it's right for Tucker to say these things, but there's something else we have to address. And that is, does the president of the United States, Donald Trump, have the strength to resist the pressure? You know, my limited experience with him is that he doesn't. It's not that his instincts aren't good. It's not that anybody who meets him doesn't like him. It's not that his intentions are not well met. That has nothing to do with it. But you put a lot of pressure on him. He has a bad habit of wiggling and ultimately caving to political pressure. And right now, let's be frank, Mr. Netanyahu controls far, far more senators in the Senate than Mr. Trump does.
Right. But something Tucker Carlson said that really resonated with me is that Trump was the closest we had to an anti-war candidate. We certainly didn't have that in the Democrats. The Democrats were going to let this war bleed us dry. But it would be a betrayal of people who had never voted Republican before, but voted Republican for this reason because of the anti-war stance, which was not complete. We should not fool ourselves that Trump ever said he wanted to stop Israel from doing what they're doing.
Woodrow Wilson was known as the man who promised to keep us out of war. Right. You know, I got to be frank with you. I think he was probably serious, but ultimately over time, he was persuaded and ultimately enabled to do exactly that. Franklin Roosevelt was told in the summer of 1941, if you press ahead with this oil and gas and copper, tin, iron, coal embargo against Japan, the Japanese will be driven into a corner. They'll feel they have no alternative but to go to war with us so that they have access to the resources we're denying. What did he do? He didn't want a war. He said, I don't want a war with the Japanese. I just want them to do what we want them to do. And what did he want them to do? He wanted them to pull 1 million troops out of China, which the Japanese privately said, we'd like to get them out. China is a mess, but we can't pull them out in 2 weeks. We can't pull them out in 6 months. It's going to take us time to get out and disengage. That was rejected. That was unaccepted. So I think there have been other presidents who did not want wars. Nevertheless, they were pushed, goaded, pressured, or drawn into them. And that's why I say, you know, with President Trump in 2017, he made it very clear that he thought it was time to get out of Afghanistan. And you can bring on Steve Bannon to talk about it. He was present for it. He brought all the great luminaries in to advise him. When I say luminaries, I'm talking about active and retired 4-stars, along with some key political figures from the Hill. And other than Steve Bannon and I think Navarro, no one thought that we should leave Afghanistan. But Trump wanted to leave Afghanistan. What did Trump do? Nothing. Trump has forgotten something that Andrew Jackson said when he was president, because he did many things when everybody thought he shouldn't, and he did them and he was successful. He said, one man with courage makes a majority. I don't think that's Donald Trump.
Yeah, is he getting the message? That's the greater question here. I mean, to me, this message that Tucker sent was a clear message to J.D. Vance and others inside the White House that you're being played. And there's one thing we know about Trump. He doesn't like being played. He doesn't like being humiliated and played. If he's aware of being played, then he's likely to push those people away from him. And yet, look at that. I mean, Tucker's up against all these national headlines. The National Review slams him, calls him the reverse Munich phenomenon. The Daily Beast, Tucker Carlson is begging Trump to ignore his old Fox buddies. The list is endless from both the left and right media slamming Tucker for trying to prevent us going into war with Iran. It's kind of laughable, actually.
Well, it's tragic because he's also being singled out as the leading anti-Semite in America by people like Levin and others. That should give you an answer. Who put Trump into the White House? Who backs him? Who subsidizes him? And who is pushing and pressuring him? We got to be frank about this. It's the Israel lobby, and they have enormous power and influence, and he can't ignore it. Now, it's easy for you and I to sit here and say, well, of course he can. But he's not Andrew Jackson. He's Donald Trump. And so I don't have confidence that he can resist this. And the other thing that I have worried about from the beginning is that Mr. Netanyahu will find another way to start the war, even if he's got to launch the strikes himself, which he can do. He can blame it on a false flag of some kind. He could point to some incident. Who knows? But he knows that if he can get this thing started, we are going to come to his aid. He knows that President Trump will not stand idly by and let the world fall apart in Israel. Quite the contrary. So it's not just a question of President Trump making the decision. It's what is he inclined to do because of the pressures on him.
And can you tell me why so many people are so convinced that Iran has nefarious intentions towards the United States with a nuclear weapon? Because we have read the IAEA reports. I read the demon who worked for the Obama administration's book, The Art of Sanctions, who talked about the cold clinical suffering that he inflicted on the Iranian people, despite never having. Obama looked for 8 years for proof of a nuclear program and never found it. So why are people sold this load of garbage that Iran has a nuclear weapon that will reverberate on us?
Can I just also say, when Tucker posted that in his piece, he said that if you think that Iran has a nuclear weapons program, you're lying, or what he said, you're being dishonest. You're being ignorant or dishonest. Right. And all the comments are like, yeah, they do. I know this. But how do these road warriors on X know this?
Well, you have this thing called right-wing watch. Somebody was telling me about it the other day. I've experienced this. I'm sure you have to some extent, where the algorithms are organized on Google to suppress people they don't like, who express opinions that they don't agree with. We need to look behind all of that and identify the people that are behind it, and then you have your answer. I think it's worse than we really appreciate. Let's keep a couple of other things in mind. President Trump has actually approved the integration of the ISIS and al-Qaeda fighters in Syria into the so-called regular Syrian army, whatever that is. And he has helped to broker, at everybody's insistence, this cooperation between the Turks, who are obviously pushing their agendas, Mr. Erdogan at the lead, who was, by the way, instrumental in helping to stand up ISIS and send it into action. He's been trying to broker that and Mr. Netanyahu's cooperation with Mr. Erdogan, because Mr. Netanyahu obviously wants to absorb half of Syria, or at least the southern portion of the country. That may break down in the near future, but stop and think about that. I mean, can you imagine? Here's the president who bragged that he was going to destroy ISIS, then claimed to have done so, and is now presiding over a policy that integrates it into the Syrian state apparatus. And then there's Pakistan. Pakistan is hardly a state that I would characterize as highly stable, peaceful, pacific, with good intentions towards the West. I mean, who are the people residing in northwest Pakistan? Well, we know who they are. They're the same people that were in Afghanistan, that we were there for supposedly for years to suppress. No one seems to bring up Pakistan. I guess we assume that India will nuke them if necessary. I don't know. But it just doesn't make any sense, because Iran, as Sam Huntington said back in the 80s, when he wrote a very brilliant book called Political Order in Changing Societies, and then he wrote another one about the West, and he said that Iran was the one Muslim state and society in the world that had the potential to join the West. And we talk about Iran today in terms that the Israelis define, because the Israelis want us to believe that nothing has changed in 46 years. It's been 46 years since the revolution. You know, Iran is a different society. It's a different place. The Iranians have absolutely no interest in killing Jews. Sorry, they don't.
Yeah. And it's such a crazy propaganda to me, because we know that Israel has nukes. We know that they've been torturing their whistleblowers for 2 decades for telling that to the world. And Israel is the aggressor right now against innocent civilians. So there is an aggressive nation that does have nukes. And we're like, you're cool over there. We're going to go look in that guy's backyard and start a war. Is that okay? This is insane.
Well, people are asking every day, why is it that the Egyptian army sitting on the border with Israel doesn't intervene to rescue the Palestinians? I mean, after all, they have an interest in saving the lives of the people in Gaza. Why aren't they doing anything? Well, there's a simple answer. Because they know privately they've been threatened. If they do such a thing, the Israelis will use a low-yield nuclear weapon to destroy the Aswan Dam. And if the Aswan Dam is destroyed, you're looking at millions of people whose lives are going to be ruined, and probably millions who will lose their lives as a result of the Nile flooding into Upper Egypt. There's a lot more. There's a lot more to all of this than any of us realize. Israel seems to almost have become an anarchistic state, because clearly what they're doing is not defensive. It's clearly offensive. They seem to be interested in doing everything in their power to destroy their neighbors and shake whatever foundations for political stability and financial stability exist in the region. I mean, it seems like Zelensky and Netanyahu are very similar. Zelensky's another bomb thrower. He's an anarchist, something the Russians are familiar with from their own history. This is not a real state anymore in Ukraine. So both of these places are highly dangerous to the stability and peace of the two regions. But I don't think that particular view is ever going to reach Donald Trump. And if he heard it, I think he'd be horrified and reel back in horror from it. So I just don't see us avoiding this.
Colonel, I want to get you out of here on this question. Ukraine, according to reports, could soon launch an attack against Hungary. And some NATO countries may even support it, according to RMX News. And warning from the Hungarian security experts say that Ukraine is already in the process of carrying out covert action inside of Hungary ahead of their national election. So when I hear that Ukraine is carrying out covert action, I immediately think, oh, that's NATO doing this, carrying out covert action against a NATO country. What do you make of this?
Well, we have to assume that CIA and MI6 are working inside Hungary to find a way to dislodge Mr. Orban from power. Remember, Orban has been the lone voice of sanity in Europe, almost from the beginning, pointing out that there was no reason for hostility or war with Russia. So I think that's abundantly clear. The West wants to be rid of Orban. Now, when I say the West, look, the people in Europe are not anti-Hungarian. That's absurd. There are not millions of Poles that are saying, oh, great, let's go annihilate Hungarians. This is all the globalist ruling elite. They're the ones with the intelligence communities that are determined to destroy anyone who stands in their path. And our friend Zelensky, as I pointed out, he doesn't even preside over a real state anymore. The Ukrainian nation is almost dead. Millions have died. Tens of millions have left the country. So what is he? He's an anarchist. And these ruling elites are anarchistic. They are creating instability, war, and destruction wherever they turn, because it's the only way they can stay in power. Clayton Zelensky is not going to last. He can't last. His own population wants to be rid of him. They're tired of seeing their men dragged off to be killed pointlessly. They want an end to the war. So he's running a giant police state, which is essentially an organized crime faction. He's an anarchist. He is now a danger to all of us. But the people that live in Poland are beginning to figure that out. I think people in France, people in Germany are beginning to figure that out, but not the governments. That's the problem. Although we have a new president in Poland, Nawrocki, and he may be a breath of fresh air. It's too soon to tell.
Yeah, we'll have to wait till August before he takes his official office on August 6th in Poland. And the Polish people have spoken. They're sick of this. They want Poland first. They don't want the Ukrainianization of their country. And they're sitting right next to a really scary dude right now in Kiev. That is for sure. I always say, people get really scary when they're sort of backed up against a wall. And that's what I'm worried about right now. And with Zelensky and the Ukrainian corrupt regime.
I would argue that applies to Mr. Netanyahu. Your statement applies to Mr. Netanyahu.
Yeah.
Virtually the whole world has turned against Israel, and all of his neighbors are against him. I mean, how do you tell everyone who lives around you that you're an animal and subhuman and then expect to develop good relations? It's absurd.
Right.
So they're both in the same boat.
Yeah. Like
And it should not be our mission to rescue either of them.
Yeah, that's exactly the point.
Exactly. Yeah.
Colonel, great to see you as always, Colonel Douglas MacGregor. Thank you so much, and hope that President Trump gets this message. Hope that he's not being bamboozled by those around him. Let's see if he can show a little Andrew Jackson after all. Colonel, great to see you.
Great to see you too. Bye-bye.